Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ludus Press's continuing coverage of E3 2017. We are on the second day of press conferences, about 25 minutes to go until the start of the Xbox E3 briefing. I have the countdown from Microsoft's official Xbox website up on the screen, so we know when they plan to start. Okay. So, strange fact that the press conferences are a bit extended this year. It used to be that they were on just 2 days, and except for Nintendo, which would end the day the show started, I believe. So it used to be Microsoft opened, you had Ubisoft, you had EA, you had Sony, and all that was just a couple, over a couple days. Now we're stretching this across 3 or 4 days here in total, so that makes each day a bit slower, which you can count as good or bad depending on your viewpoint. Um, but last afternoon we had just EA, and today we have just Microsoft. So let's talk about it. Microsoft has maybe still the most approved this generation. It has the fewest games announced that it is developing internally. And so this stands to be a very interesting press conference for them. So, big news wise, we'll get the release date, the price, the official name of their Project Scorpio, which is going to be their high-end version of the Xbox One, capable of 4K output. So that should be interesting. I was thinking after watching the EA briefing yesterday that it will be interesting for players who have stuck with the Xbox brand, who don't have a gaming PC, who don't have a PlayStation, to be able to play Battlefront probably in higher than 1080p, because the original Xbox One runs Frostbite engine at 720p, a full half the resolution of full HD. So it's going to be, I think, exciting for those players to get to experience some of DICE's really brilliant technical prowess in probably higher than full HD. Probably we're not going to be seeing Frostbite running at 60 frames per second in 4K even on the Scorpio, but we'll at least see some sort of checkerboard solution similar to what's used on the PS4 Pro. But bare minimum, we're going to be seeing 1080p finally for Frostbite games on a Microsoft console at 60 frames per second. So that's going to be really neat. That's going to be really great for those guys who haven't been able to experience that, and for Star Wars fans who want to see these locations in these areas in really high quality, but cannot afford a PC that is capable of doing so. So that's going to be exciting for them. In additional EA stuff, we are going to almost certainly see. In fact, we know for a fact we are going to see is more of BioWare's new IP, which they have codenamed Anthem, and I have drive errors. Well, we'll restart later. That's fine. Sorry. BioWare's Anthem is their new IP. It looks to take place in a post-apocalyptic future, although I guess that could also have supposed to have been some sort of alien planet, and it's not post-apocalyptic per se, but that's the vibe they're going for. Definitely looked very reminiscent of Sony's recent Horizon Zero Dawn, or even honestly of Destiny to an extent. or other. I keep thinking of Sony IPs that they've done quite a bit of post-apocalypse work recently with, in addition to Rise and The Last of Us, and they have their zombie thing that they're working on as well. So, they got a lot of post-apocalypse stuff, and that's a very popular setting. So, you know, looks to be interesting. Will be interesting to see, especially what the uh, multiplayer component is of this game, whether we are looking at a full co-op experience through the whole campaign type of thing, or if they are going to go with something more similar to what they do in the Mass Effect games with a separate multiplayer and single player experience. There's definitely been rumors, I believe, that this is going to be a fully co op adventure and that they'll be taking some inspirations maybe from the likes of Monster Hunter and Diablo and Destiny. So, that could be potentially interesting as long as there's remains an interesting story and the possibility for some solo content, or if it requires multiple people, to maybe have a better multiplayer experience than the original Destiny, which did not do a great job at matching up players for some of its more expansive stuff. So a lot of interesting potential there. I'm interested in seeing the world that they have created, and so that is one thing we know is going to be there. The other, I believe it is just two announced Microsoft properties currently in development after the cancellation of Scalebound and the release of their Phantom Dust. I'm not even going to call it an HD like remake. It was just basically the exact same game that we had before, but with the ability to run it in whatever resolution your monitor would allow. So, those were two of the projects that I'm working on. I'm actually going to try to pull up a list of Microsoft's titles that it has in development. But I believe we are just looking at the list of Microsoft Studios video games. Thanks, Wikipedia. Xbox One. Looking at 2017, we've got Crackdown 3, which was announced along with the launch of this, before the launch even of the system, 3-4 years ago now. So we've barely seen anything about it since then. Hopefully that will be actually shown in detail finally. And then the only other thing they have definitely is Sea of Thieves, which is Rare's new game, which I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of. It looked really neat in its showings in previous years, so that will be cool. But that's two games only. Their rest of their 2017 lineup that they had announced as of last year has been released. It included Halo Wars 2 and the Voodoo Vince remaster, the Phantom Dust remaster, and that's it. That's their entire lineup. They also are publishing State of Decay 2, which is a post-apocalyptic zombie game. Who would have guessed? And so the first one of that was actually quite interesting. Had some big issues, but hopefully this sequel will fix those. It is adding the cooperative play that the original was supposed to have, but ended up getting cut. So that's definitely something to look forward to. Beyond that, though, Microsoft has virtually nothing announced. Yeah, and so that brings us really to predictions then. I think it's safe to say that we will see a new Forza game. There's been a new Forza game every year since, God, I don't know, 2012 maybe? I'm going to say 2012 probably. Maybe 2011. Was there a Forza game in 2011? Yes. How about one in 2010? Okay, so every year since 2011, there's been a new Forza title. There was 4 in 2011, the first Horizon in 2012. There was 5, I believe, in 2013, and Horizon 2, 2014, 6, 2015, Horizon 3 last year, and so, stands to reason we will be getting Forza 7 this year. So, that's probably a pretty safe bet. I don't believe there's been any leaks or any, rumors regarding what that would be, but, it's happened every year in the past, so I'm going to say that's a safe bet that is going to occur this year. It would not surprise me if we saw some of the next Halo game uh, that could be released as early as this fall, I guess. Probably more likely we'll be looking at that next year. Although, releasing it alongside the Scorpio, I think would be a smart choice, as a showpiece for them. That team has, made some great looking games in the past, have really pushed technology. So I think that's a possibility of something we'll see, and maybe, specifically for the Scorpio. Um, it's too soon for a new Gears of War title, and Microsoft has very few other internal studios right now. So that's pretty much what I believe they're going to be developing internally and showing from their internal teams. They'll likely have some stuff that they are publishing from independent developers, similar to what they did with, Scalebound that they ended up canceling. But, there are still a handful of developers out there that are capable of making AAA titles that are not owned by a major publisher. And so, would not be surprised to see at least one, maybe two teasers for some new titles of that sort. And then I believe we'll probably see a handful of third-party stuff, especially in relation to Scorpio. It wouldn't surprise me if they open the show talking about Scorpio and then demonstrated all of the rest of the content that we saw today on running on a Scorpio to, show the difference from what you would have gotten with an original Xbox. I think that would be a relatively smart choice for them. Some probable games as far as that goes. Call of Duty has, very often been associated with Microsoft's press conference, and with, all of the thunder EA has had from yesterday, I think Activision could use some publicity. I think Call of Duty could use some good publicity, and so, would not surprise me if we saw Call of Duty there. Would not surprise me if we saw the new Assassin's Creed there, which has had tons of leaks, seems to be set in Egypt, be an origin story of sorts. So, would not surprise me if we saw that there. Both of those series have long appeared at Microsoft press conferences. What else? There could be some Red Dead Redemption 2 there. I think that's also possible we see that at Sony's press briefing, and it's also possible that we don't see that at all. Rockstar has never been one to really focus heavily on their E3 presence, so I definitely think it's possible they do not show up at all, but I do think that if they do show up, it will be at Sony or Microsoft's show. Um, and we know Microsoft has a lot of games that they are going to be presenting. So that's one possibility. Let's see. Um, yeah, it's interesting. There's very little for that Microsoft has announced ahead of time, and there's been not too much in the way of leaks. So it's hard to know exactly what they're going to show. Um, there could be an additional stuff from EA, Activision, or Ubisoft. Ubisoft has the new Far Cry game that they revealed shortly before E3 that is set in the United States, uh, and they likely have some new Tom Clancy stuff in the works. I do not know if anything is officially announced right now, but they always have new Tom Clancy stuff in the works. Um, Theoretically, they're also still working on Beyond Good and Evil 2. So that would be a big reveal to have at their press conference. And Activision wise, I think Destiny is more likely to be shown at Sony's press conference. That's the partner that Activision has been working with on the console front for Destiny, since the beginning. So, would not surprise me if that is not present. Um, and then there could, I guess, be some teasers for stuff that we will see at Bethesda tomorrow. Maybe footage from the new Wolfenstein that is rumored to show up. It's and we just had two Arcane releases. Still probably too early to be seeing footage from the next Elder Scrolls title. So that's the only thing I could really think of there. And then you're really looking at Japanese publishers mainly. Um, Square Enix is probably your best bet there. Something possibly from their European branch. Um, yeah, it's really hard to guess what Microsoft is going to have. Yeah, I'm honestly at a loss. That they claim they have a ton of content they're going to show, but most of it looks to be new reveals. So that's potentially going to make for a very very exciting show. Yeah, I'm trying really hard to think of some other potential stuff we could see. Hmm. Yeah, no, I'm really at a loss. There's I guess the possibility we could see some more of Shadow of War, the new Lord of the Rings game from Warner Brothers. I guess it's also possible we could see something new from Rocksteady, makers of the Arkham games. We know that series is over, but obviously they've been working on something for several years now, so it's possible we'll see that reveal, see whether they have been working on an original IP or being owned by Warner Brothers. Is far more likely that they are working on an adaptation of some other property. So possibility we'll see what that is. And man, you know of all the press briefings this year, Microsoft I maybe have the least to predict. So let's move on to hopes and dreams. Hope and dream wise, I honestly also don't have too much specifically from Microsoft. I think one of Microsoft's big challenges is that they don't have a 30 or 40-year catalog of titles that they have developed that people are looking forward to seeing revived. They don't have that nostalgia play that Nintendo very much can pull on, and Sony even at this point can pull on. And you look all the way back at their earliest releases on Windows, and it's a lot of uh, you know flight packs, or Flight Simulator, sorry, and various card games and that type of stuff. They released a chess game, a golf game, that type of thing in the early '90s. Um, the first Flight Simulator was all the way back in '82, I believe. So that type of stuff has existed, but they didn't really publish popular titles back then. It's a lot of simulation, flight sim stuff, and puzzle what would be referred to as casual games today, stuff that came with the Windows operating system. They made a pinball game. They yeah, pinball, golf, cards, that type of thing. That was their thing. The only series really that's I could call beloved from that pre Xbox era would be the Age of Empires series, and they really dug that into the ground. So don't expect to see that at all. So that's takes care really of the hopes and dreams stuff, even of Microsoft. Like Phantom Dust was one of my big hopes and dreams. I guess if I had to list anything, I would say I hope that this Phantom Dust re-release has been successful enough that we will get a full-on either remake or even a follow-up or a reboot, something. Some more Phantom Dust. I think that was a really great, ahead of its time idea, and I really like the world they created there. So, I'll be fine with more of that. Um, yeah, it's really tough to point to some beloved old Xbox things you want to see because there just aren't many of them. BioWare made Jade Empire, for example, in that era, but that transferred over to EA when EA purchased BioWare. And KOTOR was a Xbox console exclusive, also on Windows, but that's owned by Disney at this point, and again would be something that EA would be working on, not Microsoft. And then most of their other stuff from that era was just not hugely successful. You saw that Voodoo Vince re-release earlier, and that was maybe their most successful B game from the era. There's Grabbed by the Ghoulies that was on the Rare Replay collection. That was okay. You had Crimson Skies, which I really enjoyed back in the day, but again, that license left when they closed down FASA, and I don't know exactly who controls the video game rights to Crimson Skies at this point. So, probably not going to be seeing that. Brute Force was released from the original Xbox era, but that was very poorly received. Don't really see that coming back. And obviously this Fable, but Lionhead, well, I believe still theoretically existing, maybe. I'm pretty sure Lionhead has not officially been shut down. Let's check that. Lionhead might not even exist anymore for all I know. Yeah, it was. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Lionhead is, done. So there's no reason to believe we'll be seeing more Fable titles. And yeah, Microsoft has really gutted its internal studio team, and so there's not much really left. I'm looking right here at a list of their current internal teams. You've got 343, makers of Halo. You've got the Coalition, which is the company that works on the Gears series. You got Turn 10, which works on the Forza Horizon and Forza Motorsport games. You've got Rare. You've got, let's see, this is a studio called Big Park, which uh, worked on some Kinect stuff. Does not look like they have released anything since. And you've obviously got Mojang, which is a the developer of Minecraft. And I guess it's possible that we'll, and maybe even likely, we'll see some Minecraft stuff here. And that's it. That's their entire internal lineup. So, not too much there. And so, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. Luckily, though, we should have the show starting any second now, and so I'm going to sign off, and I will return after the show ends. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we are done.